This is a High Inquisitor. Texas will be the first state to start enforcing homosexuality laws on the books, which is an interesting comment. Possibly slippery slope, but I don't know, Jenna Belk. You live in Texas. What do you think is the general sense there, just from the overall population and women? Like, have you kind of talked to anyone about this? Do you know what they think in Texas about this?
From the people that I know, I, for the most part, hang in pro-choice groups. Mm-hmm. So my people are not exactly happy. But as for certain people that I don't necessarily hang out with, that I know of from here, I mean, so this is how I used to view it. I used to believe, well, what's the definition of murder? The ending of a human life. And I was like, oh, well, this is by definition the ending of a human life. So I was like, well, by definition, it's murder then. So that's just good enough for me. Till I started learning more about the whole, they give you the image of a baby and say, this is what, no, that's not what you're doing. But I mean, I'm not even one of the most extreme scenarios that these women are bringing up. I'm one of just those average people that this is affecting. I am just one of those people. I have a baby. I am married. Why would it apply to me? Well, for example, I was talking to a family member about how I don't know if I want to have a second child. And they said, oh, well, give it some time. Okay, that's not a decision I want to make emotionally. That's not a decision I want to make on a whim. That's not something that anybody else should make for me. If I do get pregnant again, I deserve, and that child deserves, for me to want that child and be able to support that child as much as this one. So I'm actually a little afraid right now, because if I do get pregnant, and if for some reason we decide we couldn't take care of it, which looking at it, it doesn't look like I could right now anyway, I would have to depend on family to get me out of this state to try to take care of it. And I'm still paying off medical bills from having him, getting help from family with that because I couldn't even afford that. So I'm pretty nervous. I did just have a doctor's appointment and I was very strongly recommended to get on birth control. So
yeah,
we still have that legal.
Yeah, and Sunny kind of touched on that, the financial burden that that people could find themselves in, whether you know more than anybody, you just had a kid. So I'm sure you see the difference in what your lifestyle is now versus what it was before. I chose not to have, I couldn't get pregnant, but just for me and my partner, we didn't want kids. And people look at us like, why don't you want kids? You're supposed to have, like, it's the normal thing that you're supposed to eventually have kids, and you're not normal if you decide not to. I have other things to do. I like kids. They're okay. I like other people's kids, but not everybody has to have a kid. Not everybody has to have more than one. And it's super presumptuous of someone to say to you, oh, just wait until later. Wait until you change your mind. Like, that's just a given.
Well, and something that I think that speaks to is, another fellow Texas uterus owner and I have talked about. When I first got pregnant with this one, I was very excited very early. And I had been one of those people that talked about how abortion equates killing, germs, right? Mm-hmm. And this friend of mine got kind of offended because of her past experiences with miscarriages, but she was confused as to how I could possibly care that much about this germ, as I referred to it before I got pregnant. And the thing is that, and this is what I would tell anybody that had those thoughts, which I'm sure there's plenty of people that do, I was planning and hoping for what I was anticipating. I was excited and am grateful and was, for thinking about what he was going to be, what he is going to be. I don't know how I would feel if I had a miscarriage. I've never had one, but I do know that if I needed to, I could do an abortion. And again, that's baffling to so many people that I know, that I can possibly say that with a baby, with him even in my arms. But one of the reasons that I'm okay with having him in my arms during this is because I don't think that should change the circumstance. That doesn't change my answer.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I know that you had a little bit of hesitation about appearing on the show because you were doing your motherly, you were on babysitting detail tonight. But we talked about it and I was like, no, you come on the show. We want to see the motherly duties and we want to hear the opinion of a mother who's doing motherly duties about abortion. I think that's totally fair and appropriate and helpful. Kind of touched on what you were saying before, Jenna, Miyu, about viability and the at the 5th week you were talking about, and then he said at 8 weeks is when it becomes. I think Anna said that it goes from being a embryo to a fetus, but yeah, the law is 6 weeks. So just it seems like religion to me. And what do you think about that, Biddy? I mean, can you think of any secular arguments? But before you answer that, let me give a shout out to Aunt Kathy, who just gave us $10 because she is such a fan of you guys. Also on the pro birth control for males and females. Yeah, I don't know about that. One of you is going to have to educate me about that. Birth control, is there such a thing as male birth control? Anybody?
Yes.
There is. Like, is it a pill or I know condoms, but.
There's also vasectomies.
Vasectomy. There you go. Yeah, of course.
That's it.
Yeah.
And there was male birth control in pill form, and they ended up doing away with it because of the side effects, which are the same side effects that women face by taking birth control.
Oh no! You mean I have to deal with side effects? No, we can't have that. That should only be.
You can't have that for the men's.
No, but I do want to answer her question because birth control costs money. It's not something that everybody can get. B, there's many states who have tried to regulate that as well and keep women. For instance, my daughter, she's on birth control, not for prevention of birth. Having a baby. She's only 15. She's not sexually active yet. However, she has terrible periods and terrible, not PMS, but the other one, the worst one. Anyway, I can't think of what it's called right now. It was right there and it went away. Anyway, we're having a hard time getting it refilled because our insurance changed. And all of a sudden, in 1 month, it went off the chain. And so we're working to make that happen. It's not accessible to everybody. There's also side effects. Not every woman female can handle those types of things. There are many different types of birth control. It's not something that is, it's just not an easy thing. It's not something that's just super simple. And the religious right has fought against, with Obamacare, allowing for women to have free birth control. They don't want us to have abortions. They don't want us to have sex, period. That's really what the bottom line is. And then take into effect that birth control fails. It's not 100% effective, but especially condoms. So yes, let's protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves not just from unwanted pregnancies, but from STDs. And we need to be careful. We need to be responsible. We need to think, not because of sex being a bad thing or something like that, but because we only have one life, and it can be easily affected. And so, yes, I'm all about having contraceptives, but it's not like, hey, well, let's just make everybody have. You should have just put an aspirin between your knees, like they've said in the past. It's not that simple. We need to have multiple choices here, including access to healthcare and healthcare for women's reproductive rights. Period. Right. Into discussion. Yeah. The whole ball and chain.
I also just wanted to piggyback real quick before Biddy, you jump in concerning insurance. How insurance is regulated, especially when it comes to prescriptions and birth control, varies from state to state. Some states will actually be able to include, depending on the type of insurance that you have, to cover birth control, especially if you utilize it for other medical practices, like, controlling periods. I know I was on progesterone for a very long time. And basically, progesterone is a hormone that can also be used as birth control in order to regulate periods if a person happens to bleed heavily and also have other side effects from having periods. So if I happen to be in a state where insurance was not going to allow or have an employer that, if they were faith-based, because this is an issue that was happening too with the Affordable Care Act, if faith-based organizations who had employees wanted to decided that they don't want to cover birth control, any type of birth control pill, even if it's deemed classified as such, even if a person is not necessarily getting it for that purpose, they don't have to cover it. So again, this is another overarching issue when it comes to even helping to help regulate women's health care.
Biddy, does this seem like a religious law to you, or does it seem like there's any secular basis for this?
Okay, so scripturally speaking, they can't ground their position within the Bible itself. The Bible designates life all throughout it at the breath of life, the first breath, when the baby is officially born. Going back to like incest and stuff like that, that's obviously cursed. In Numbers, it specifically talks about a potion that the priest would give a woman that was brought to him by her husband. If she was found unfaithful, her belly would swell and it would cause her thigh to rot. And thigh is a euphemism for your reproductive organs. So basically, if that child within the womb was from another man, which could go back into like being raped, incest. So even in the Bible, there was an out for that. It would cause the baby to miscarry. And like there's also in Exodus and Leviticus, you have if it's a life for a life sort of punishment. And so if a woman falls down and the baby is fine, a man is to pay a fine. If the baby were to die, or if the baby were to die, the man just has to pay a fine. But if the woman were to die, then it's a life for a life sort of situation. So all throughout the Bible, I don't know how you can ground it. I think they use Jeremiah. I knit you in my womb, but he's more so reflecting on what God has done for him. It's not really a passage on whether God designates, life at conception or not. And
so the Bible is not it's not anti-abortion at all then?
No. In fact, so where do evangelicals get this?
Yeah.
In 1968, have you ever heard of Christianity Today? It's probably one of the most popular magazines. It was by Billy Graham himself. It went through all of the Bible, and that at that time they held the position that it was at that first breath is designated life. But it was Bob Jones, the televangelist, who believed that racial segregation was ordained by God. And there was a lawmaker that had just told him that he needed, if he was going to get federal funding for his school, he needed to include people of color. And so that pissed him off. And it was through a radio show, they said, how can we build this platform, this political platform to benefit us? And it was just some random caller that said, what about the topic of abortion? And it was from that moment, a few years after 1968, did you have evangelicals adopt this life starts at conception bullshit. But you can't find that in the Bible anywhere.
Yeah, I can ask a question.
Yeah.
So, and this is, I guess, towards Jenna as the nurse here. So when they say sperm meets egg, they're implying that there's like one little guy that's swimming in there and just finally makes it home, and that's when life begins. Is that anything like how it happens, Jenna?
No, So yes, great question. Are conception and pregnancy the same thing? No, it's not. Conception is exactly what you pretty much said. It's the sperm actually traveling to that egg, and that sperm implants itself in that egg. Once that occurs, once they meet, that is the perceived conception of that potential, birth of that child in the 9 months later. Pregnancy is once that fertilized once that fertilized egg moves through the fallopian tubes to your uterus, implants itself on the uterus lining, and then the cellular, multiplying
Mitosis.
begins. Yes, thank you. Mitosis begins. All that cellular breakdown and the growth of the cell from an embryo to fetus and all that stuff.
So the cellular mitosis doesn't begin until after embryo implantation into the uterine
that is
wall?
correct. Yeah.
I didn't even know that. I knew the first part that they were different. So it was kind of a leading question, but I didn't know that little fact. Is that something that you guys, this is a question for all of you. First of all, besides Jenna, Miyu, did anyone else know that? Okay, so I see two people nodding, two people shaking their head, and one person doing neither. Do you guys think that the majority of the American electorate or the majority of people know that?
No. And I mean, and we covered like a lot of these particular topics in Texas, because Texas is just doing some wild shit. Let's just keep it a buck.
They need to stop.
They really do.
And to be fair, the only reason that I know is because I just went through. So
yeah. And I mean, like I know that, like, I don't know if, like, I'm just volunteering this information. I have had a miscarriage. So I've had to, and I've wrestled with that whole notion about when I was pregnant, if I was going to have an abortion, because I was no longer with the father. And there was a lot of different, issues that was going on at that particular time. After a while, I decided to have the baby. And once I decided to have the baby, I lost the baby. But once, like, I had to, like, kind of go through, like, all the different doctor visits and going through the ultrasounds and stuff. Like, a lot of this stuff was explained to me, exactly what was going on in my body, when it went from conception to pregnancy. And even to if anybody wants to, like, kind of like back on up with these different truths when it comes to, like, abortion in the Bible, Recovering from Religion has a great article on their website about exactly what the Bible says about abortion, and it's exactly what is opposite of what a lot of these evangelicals espouse, what they think that God says about abortion. And I think it's very telling, specifically with these particular legislatures, when they are formulating these bills, they don't have a clue when it comes to the medical science and how it impacts people when it comes to their health.
They refuse to privy themselves to that.
No, I mean, like, we just covered, like, the whole issue concerning, like, trans people in sports, and this particular overarching bill that just got passed through the Texas Senate, banning basically, and that's going to affect mostly trans women from being able to participate in sports. But their ban that they're utilizing is not based in science. It's based completely on their worldview of what they feel should and should not be, as far as, like, what they see. And it's the same issue that's happening here. I'm pretty sure that if they actually consulted with any type of medical professionals concerning this particular topic, they would have got a really big education on exactly what happens when it comes from conception to pregnancy, and also, what could be the impact, even medically, on these women that you are keeping from being able to do this if it's viable to them.